I don't know. Maybe we'll try and air this on Yom Kippur, maybe, of 1996. It might be an appropriate time, I'm not sure. I got these programs lined up and everything like that. But
because religious Jews won't turn on television, so they won't say that.
Oh. Mm.
And I wouldn't like it, the idea of somehow bad news.
Well, yeah. I don't know. It's just you have to do it the way the cycles come, you know.
You know, you shouldn't mock whether it's...
No, at all, not at all. Welcome very much to Conversations. Well, I'm pleased to welcome to the program two men who are concerned with, well, let's see, the history of the Jewish experience, as it were, but with particular reference, I think it's fair to say, on the contemporary situation, particularly revolving around Israel. I'm happy to welcome to the program an old friend of Conversations. I might introduce him first, as it were, and that's being Lenni Brenner. We've done, I don't know how many programs with Lenni over the years, and welcome, Lenni. And let me show him one of the books we haven't had a chance to talk with, and maybe they can come in a little tight focus on. This one's called The Great Wall.
Iron Wall.
I'm sorry, The Iron Wall, and its subtitle is?
Zionist Revisionism from Jabotinsky to Shamir.
Right, okay, and you've written others. He's written another, you've written how many books, Lenni?
4 books.
4 books, including another one, Zionism in the Age of the Dictators. It had a wide publication and distribution and so forth. And Lenni, welcome very, very much to Conversations. And on my right is Monroe Rosenthal. And Monroe is we have another book here that we want to show that he has written. And this one is, maybe we could show it now, if you could come in on the book. It's called, his book is called Wars of the Jews, and it's subtitled, Monroe?
Well, Warfare from Biblical Through Modern Times.
Warfare from Biblical Through Modern Times,
of the
and
Jewish people.
Of the Jewish people,
Yeah.
and this is the way it looks. We want to let people know how they look right here at the outset. And gentlemen, both, welcome very, very much to Conversations. Monroe, I wonder, maybe we could start with you, because we've talked with Lenni on a number of occasions, so with you the first time, welcome you to Conversations and to the Manhattan Network. But I was wondering, we started off talking, you're going back the War of the Jews from biblical times, from way, way back, so you're getting a wide sweep of the human experience. And I wonder, maybe you could, what it is that differentiates your view of things, as it were, in terms of the contemporary condition, from Lenni's? And maybe also, if you could, maybe bring it in, since you go back to biblical times, set the framework of the Jewish people in a wider, historical reference, maybe just for the wide audiences viewing. Fill it in for us a little bit, when they were expelled from Jerusalem and that sort of thing. And just give us a background, since you do go back and touch upon the biblic aspects, or the source of the unique people, the Jewish people in the world.
Yes, in this book I try to dispel, as a matter of fact, certain myths, especially that thing of when the Jews were expelled from Israel. Because the common misconception is that the end of Jewish existence in Israel, politically, militarily, was the Zealot War, which lasted from 66 CE till 71, or AD. And I try to show that was just the first, actually the second of many Jewish revolts against, let's call it Greco-Roman invasion of West Asia, or Greco-Roman imperialism. A series of wars that started with the Maccabees about 200 BC or BCE, and extended till as late as 628 AD, when the Jews and the Samaritans, land of Israel, in alliance with the much stronger Persians or Iranians of that time, had their last military attempt to throw the Romans out. At that time, they expelled the Byzantines from Israel and Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and reset a kind of a Jewish state until 14 years later, when the Byzantines defeated them.
You have a sort of a geopolitical view of things in terms of the history of the
I believe
Jewish people and that sort of
it's
thing.
It's like a Marxist believes in many things, but primarily I call him an economic determinist. I consider myself a spatial determinist and a historic.
So you would have read Reinhold Niebuhr and that sort of thing, and
well,
read...
but he's not really in my field. He's more of a moralistic. I tend to be more of a Machiavellian, though I do believe in God and the final word of the holy books in the end.
Maybe we could go back to the holy books, and if you could, and I don't mean to go, because I know both you gentlemen are concerned with things in a secular kind of view of the world,
Absolutely.
what's going on in that. But back to the holy book and this is such primer stuff and so forth, but like that. The holy books themselves, the Torah and the books, the visions and the creation of the unique spiritual creation of the Jewish people itself. Where does that go to, and how important has the Torah and the Jewish religious tradition been to the maintenance of the unique Jewish experience
well, I
and
prefer to
expression
encompass
throughout
more
the history
and
of
say that in the Middle East today.
Well, I was thinking in the terms of the history of the world.
That the political loyalties are determined for the people in this whole vast region of the Near East, whether they're loyal to the Torah or the Koran or the Gospels. They all believe in the Gospel truth or the Koran truth. So if you're a Koran believer, and especially an Arab, you believe the Koran begins by giving the Jewish people title to the land. In some of the early surahs, Muhammad has Allah says to Moses, take your people, enter the land I have promised you, turn not right nor left, or you'll turn losers. But later, he says the Jews lost the right to the land of Israel through three actions: immorality at the time of the first kings, so Solomon's temple, and Israel was destroyed. Then the second time, in the time of the Herodian temple, the Jews rejected their last prophet, the prophet Isa, who is to the Christians Jesus Christ. And then the third time, in 620s, they rejected the prophet of their cousins, the Arabs, Muhammad. So the Koran says, till the Jews apologize for their attempt to kill Jesus and become Muslims, they won't be entitled to the Holy Land. Now the Gospels imply that point too, that the Jews did reject Jesus, and therefore their temple was destroyed, and it's doubtful they'll get their state. But the Torah gives the land of Israel, including present-day Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, to the Hebrew people in perpetuity.
Now, does it to you, and Lenny, you can jump in here too, because I'm just in between here in a certain sense. You two gentlemen have a different kind of view on things. But does the Torah or the Torah precepts and the religious precepts have a significance, resonance to you as you begin to discuss and understand modern politics and the Jewish state and Middle Eastern realities? Or is that orthodox view of things, or that religious view of things, something that you tend to sort of see in mythic terms, the way so many secularly minded people see the religious tradition?
Well, I personally am an atheist. Okay, have been since before I was 13, before I was bar mitzvah. By the time I was 13, I was like a lot of Jewish kids of my generation, sick of the religion.
You were bar mitzvahed as an atheist?
I was an atheist. But it didn't matter as far as my parents were concerned. I was going to get bar mitzvahed
no matter what. Right.
Come the end of the world.
There's world sit in that, yeah.
But more importantly, in terms of contemporary politics, a majority of young Jews, not only in the United States, but everywhere in the world except in Israel, now marry non-Jews and are basically totally indifferent to the Jewish religion. Okay, and even among the older generation, no more than about 40% of the Jews in the United States belong to a synagogue. So. Certainly for most Jews, when they think about Israel, they think about the Jews, not about God and the Bible. They think about the Jews of Israel, and then maybe they think about the Arabs as well. Some, I do, and so on. But it's a distinct minority who are concerned with whether or not the Talmud says this or the Bible says that. I don't think I'm saying anything untold there, that it's a minority at this particular point.
This secularization is something that we can see as a characteristic of much of the world. The world is going secular.
Well, let me put it this way.
Compared to the 19th century.
The Jews are, on a world basis and in America and in a world basis, the most educated stratum on earth.
Yes, that's right.
All right?
That's right.
So the impact of education is highest on them than on anyone else, for sure.
Okay.
And let's put it this way, you go to, Jews make up 20% of the university population in 38 universities in the United States, including Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and so on and so forth. Well, they take science, and they simply drift away from the religion. Now, bear in mind that the percentage, again, I don't think I'm saying anything exceptional, the percentage of Jewish atheists is far higher than the percentage of atheists in the American population, right? About 82% of the American people or more believe in some kind of God.
Yes.
All right? Certainly, the percentage of Jews who believe in a God is less, and among the younger generation, I would say, I would think is a minority at this particular point.
See, I feel you're focusing on a minority of a minority, the Jews who are something over 1% here in America. The world, I think, is going towards nationalism, both ethnic and religious.
And away from these spiritual and
if you
religious
know, that's going
backgrounds,
in India, a mob of almost 1 million tore down the Ayodhya Mosque, which they felt was built upon the birthplace of the Hindu god Rama, an ancient Hindu temple.
Right.
In Israel, the focus of religious nationalists is to regain and rebuild a temple on the Temple Mount. The Serbian army, the Chechen army, the Bosnian Muslim army go into war with the Green Band of Islam over them. And in the Islamic world, in the Orthodox Christian world, from Russia to Serbia to Greece, religion burns very bright. And in India, the Hindu Nationalist Party captured first place, as in Turkey, the Islamic Nationalist Party captured first place. So maybe some Jewish intellectuals at Brandeis College are moving away or debating maybe there isn't a God. But for majority of people, particularly in this vast region of Africa, Asia, it's called the Middle East, from Morocco over to Iran and Afghanistan, people are believing in the gospel, or the Koran especially, and a few of us in the Torah.
Yeah, people mostly
it's an expression of warfare today on the part of people who are fighting in the Balkans and in the subcontinent of India and so on, the Middle East.
Yeah, and you can tend to see these in geopolitical terms like any other force in the world and
it's
so
a force
forth.
Like communism.
Now bear in mind, Harold, that there is a proverb that the fools outnumber the wise in every country in the world. And I would hardly use Bosnia, for example, as an example of intelligent politics on anybody's side. And you mentioned India. You do not want to get in the way of a fanatic Hindu mob or a fanatic Muslim mob. I mean, these are, you wouldn't want them in your house, so to speak.
And you have Christian fundamentalists, and that's
and we got them here. I mean, in other words, I listen to Pat Robinson just like I'm a pious man in that regard, and I find it difficult to. I am the stepson of a Jewish carpenter, you see, so I find the notion that the Messiah is the stepson of a Jewish carpenter is charming. I mean, But nevertheless, let's put it this way: I believe in freedom of religion, but just as equally, I believe in the equality of religions, and I would say that if there is to be peace in the Middle East, and peace in the Middle East, I mean neither Jews killing Arabs nor Arabs killing Jews. And I don't want dead Arabs or dead Jews, and that goes on all the time. It's going to have to be on the basis of the absolute equality of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, the absolute equality of Israelis and Arabs, that even a deviation by the width of a hair is a recipe for war.
This is your view.
I am certain of it. I speak ex cathedra, as it were. Right? There is a reason why we have equal protection of the laws in the United States. Fair housing, fair employment, fair this and fair that. There is a reason for that, and that reason is that is the only way to have peace between ethnic and religious communities. That is the only way. That is the only way.
Well, you could do that, or Reinhold Niebuhr used to say, we live in a moral nation, but an immoral world, and that the basis of geopolitics cannot be based upon these abstract concepts of
it's not
morality because it doesn't apply. You don't have international law.
Lenni brought up the Christian fundamentalists, and he mentioned Pat Robertson.
Yes.
Now, this is very important. If you look at the kind of writings and speakings of the Christian fundamentalists here, the Christian right, and you compare it to the fundamentalist Muslims, you'll see many of the same things bug them. They're both against homosexuality. They're both against racial consciousness that makes weak the religious solidarity. They're both against women's liberation, lesbianism, short skirts. They're both against the pop culture. And it's interesting, a part of the Muslim nationalism is a hatred of American culture. When we went in, our FBI, and took out some terrorists from Pakistan, the Pakistan newspaper, the Karachi Times, a right-wing conservative newspaper, said, okay, we gave over these Hamas terrorists or PLO terrorists. Maybe we should have the Americans give over to us people like Michael Jackson and Madonna, because they're cultural terrorists with their depravity and their pop culture. They're destroying our Islamic morality.
Well, there might have been. There's a thing of journalism. They say journalists are to, what is it? It's to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. There are certain kinds of moral principles, and there's certain moral overriding spiritual principles that tend to be, the Ten Commandments or the Golden Rule and other kinds of moral precepts that have been the core of most of your spiritual traditions. They would agree upon that. To me, and to the degree to which people see secularization and an overthrowing of morality in the fullest sense, not in the narrow sense of miniskirts, but in the fullest sense, there would be an objection to that on the part of spiritually minded people. To me, there's a contradiction
around the world. People like, say, Lenni, who's a very sincere and dedicated revolution against imperialism.
Yeah, and ethics and so forth.
But is he and are the other men of his ilk and women blind to the fact that in the Islamic world, in the Hindu world, in the small Israeli Jewish world, American culture is seen as a form of cultural imperialism that will subvert the nationalism, religion, traditional family and state loyalties of those people to some global civilization, some global culture.
New world.
And is Lenni aware that even the concept of equality is so anathema, say, to Islam, that it's almost seen as an anti-Islamic stricture.
Monroe, I understand what you're saying, but look, in Israel, about 2-3 years ago, the leading pop song in Hebrew in the country was "The Messiah isn't coming, he isn't even phoning." All right? And I would say
in Hebrew?
In Hebrew, all right? And I would say about half the kids in Israel, at least, at a minimum, really think the Jewish religion is something for the dustbin of history, as we Marxists, call that kind of thing. But even in the Islamic world, I tell you that, let me put it this way. I was in Libya, and I came in on a Swiss airline, and in the food, it had a little note, there's no pork in the food, okay? But they didn't say there was no alcohol in the whiskey. I would bet that the majority of the Libyans on that plane, it was almost all Libyans, but for me and maybe a couple of other people, were, as it were, stocking up the camel's hump, as you were, before they got there, all right? You and I know, and Monroe knows, there are any number of Muslims in this world who, the sign of male bar mitzvah, a Muslim bar mitzvah, as it were, is you go to some place where you can get a shot of whiskey, all right? So to a considerable degree, fundamentalism is the empty barrels making the most noise. The reality, when you're there on the ground, I tell you that if you had a penny for every pork chop eaten by Jews, or a penny for every piece of drink of whiskey drunk by Muslims, you would be in the Forbes 400
Yeah,
forever.
well, this is a tendency one can see, and some people think it's good, some people think it's progress to be able to go scientific with knowledge base. We have more and more we know. I think it maybe is relevant in terms of the, if you think of Israel, because they were in diaspora and they did read the Talmud, and there was great emphasis put, if I understand it, there was great emphasis put on scholarship and learning, which honed those skills that have now come into science and medicine and so forth, but the emphasis upon learning, particularly with the Ashkenazi and so forth, but what they were learning with great detail and adhering to with great faith and reverence was the Torah and the Talmud. I'm talking now the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, until finally there came to be a thought, if I'm not interpreting it right, Zionism grew out of the revulsion that was felt by, you know, the anti-Semitism that was being expressed and so forth, and that we have to move into a political context. But it was opposed by many of the traditional rabbis and the people who were in this religious context.
It was opposed by many different people from many points of view.
It still is, by many, certain Orthodox,
well,
a minority, the Satmar people.
The Satmar and the Natura Karta, but I guess I'm trying to differentiate you from that, because they are people who are Torah, they call themselves Torah true, you know, and they say the Torah is saying that the return, if this is Israel emerging in the modern experience as the ingathering at the end.
I find those type of Orthodox very bad. I'll tell you why, because the Christian and the Muslim both lay a guilt trip on the Jewish people, therefore they didn't have Israel these 2,000 years. And it seems to me those type of anti-Zionist Orthodox rabbis are accepting the Christian and Muslim lie.
Well, they say
they say for the sins of the Jews, we shouldn't have Israel.
They're saying much like Lenni said. They said
Lenni doesn't say.
No, I have nothing in common
he has nothing in
with
common
him. Look,
with
I am friendly with people in the Neturei Karta. I have even worked for them. Okay.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. No, I did. But the fact of the matter is, ideologically, they are a museum piece. Okay. Their influence on the Jews of Israel is next to nil.
Right.
Let's put it that way. Next to nil, nor is it ever going to be any different.
Right.
Israel today has the highest percentage of PhDs in the world.
Right.
Okay? And these people are not concerned with the laws of Moses. These are people who are concerned with the laws of Einstein.
Did Zionism come out of the laws of Moses, or did the definition of the Jewish people come out of the laws of Moses and the Torah historically?
Look.
And if there has been a revision, or if there's been a transformation from religiously inclined people of the book and learning to secularly minded people who will not pay attention to their spiritual traditions, when and how did that occur? And what role does Zionism have in terms of defining a new ideology to which they could apply, they could appeal?
It's a long one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look, most Zionists would say, including Ben-Gurion, who was a secular, that the Bible, the Torah and the other holy book, gives us our claim. The Bible says very clearly the land of Israel and delineates its borders. And that's something America doesn't have. Our Mexican border is just strictly conquest in the 1840s.
Yes.
But Israel's borders were given by the God, by the Torah. So Zionism comes out of the Bible, there's no question about it. But in the Middle Ages, our religion had many, many forms and transformations. And as we pointed out, many rabbis felt it was a bad thing to have this secular state. But Rabbi Kook, the Grand Rabbi of Israel, at a certain point in the 20s, began to see that even socialist and atheist settlers were beginning to bring God's work about. As many men who are not religious have fought for their religions, be it Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, or Judaism. So he and others began to see the hand of God in the Israeli military victories.
Right, I see. Go ahead.
Harold, let me toss in, because this is
absolutely,
you know, second to what is a Jew, the question of what is a Zionist is a big question, right? A gentleman I met once, certainly one of the world's greatest historians, Eric Hobsbawm, wrote a book on the history of nationalism, and I had the pleasure of meeting him and discussing it with him and so on and so forth. And you know, he pointed out, look, if you run all nationalisms through the hoop, you know, through the microscope, they have a tendency to look back, to a glorious past, a great empire in the past, you know? So if you're going to set up a Jewish nationalism, the Bible is a wonderful book for that. It's all about the empire of Solomon, the kingdom of David, and the glory, and they conquered this, and they took that, and God gave it to them, and so on and so forth, okay?
And set the terms for the return.
But I just want to point out something. Until the United States of America, on the basis of racism and anti-Semitism, cut immigration, totally free immigration into the United States, when the Jews poured out of Eastern Europe from 1881 until 1924, when the Americans put the freeze on, they made a rush towards secular United States, not towards Palestine. They couldn't give a damn about it, all right? And here in the United States, when the Jews had a working class, they hardly have today, but when they, you know, a blue-collar working class.
Oh, yeah,
but in the days when they did, the unions were bitterly opposed to Zionism. Never mind the Bible, they said, listen, these guys are coming around, these Zionists are coming around with a tin can, trying to collect money from our bosses. And the bosses are giving them money that belongs to us, because we work for that money, all right? So, in other words, I really don't care any more about what's in the Bible with regards to Israel than I care what's in the Koran with regards to Mecca, or what's in the Christian Bible, et cetera, all right?
Okay.
And I want to emphasize something. In the United States of America, I mean, we have as splendid a number of political whores and knaves as any country on earth, all right? And they... I pray daily, says Clinton, and what's his name, Dole prays every half hour, and you know, and so on and so forth. When it comes down to the laws in the United States, the Supreme Court says we don't want to hear any of that. We don't care what you say. The fact of the matter is, we don't take our politics out of any holy books. We are secular, and everybody is equal before the law. Now, things are not perfect in the United States. Everybody knows that, all right? But we do not have the intensity and the ferocity of the criminality of what's going on in the Middle East, all right? I mean, both of us, before we started this show, Monroe asked me a legitimate question. We were talking, today is a day when there's supposed to be demonstrations, Muslim demonstrations on the
Temple Mount.
The Temple Mount, or the Mosque of Omar, whatever you want to call it, and the Israeli army and the police are fully surrounding them, and so on and so on. We do not know whether or not there is violence. We by the time we got into the studio, we don't know that yet. It hasn't been.
Well, they reported in the news there weren't very large turnout.
All right, but good. But the fact of the matter is that tomorrow there will be a shooting in Lebanon, and there was one yesterday, et cetera, okay? But we don't have that in the United States. You know, we have Pat Robinson, we have Farrakhan, we have the Lubavitcher rabbi, the followers of the Lubavitcher rabbi, et cetera, but by and large, we have an enormous amount of peace. Not, you know, in other words, peace between ethnic and religious groups is the norm today in the United States.
Well, it has been in the norm, but there are signs with Oklahoma and other kinds of things.
No, Oklahoma has nothing to do with you know, I mean, period.
It is. Oklahoma's to do not with religion.
No,
but with
right.
The other thing
Exactly.
I'm emphasizing with racism has to do with a fear of the white Christian majority in this country that they're being overwhelmed by Jews, but much more important, by
but you're
blacks,
not saying
by
the white Christians are behind McVeigh. I mean,
no, but there is a feeling amongst the white Christian majority in this country that they're losing out on a certain level.
Look,
they don't all have this.
Colin Powell is one of the most popular people in the United States. Okay, I mean, for sure. All right?
Yeah.
There are any number of, you mentioned Michael Jackson, all right?
Yeah.
Okay? Nobody is thinking of taking away the rights of Colin Powell and Michael Jackson. If the next Chief of Staff of the United States were to be a Hindu American or something like that, the Christian Americans in the United States wouldn't even bat an eye. We have reached the point in the United States where the Secretary of Treasury is Jewish, the Secretary of Labor is Jewish, the Secretary of Agriculture is Jewish, the Trade Representative is Jewish.
And I believe the FBI guy,
the CIA, the head of the CIA and the Federal Reserve are all headed by Jews.
Sounds like a Jewish conspiracy.
It would sound like that, except that no one says a thing. No one.
No, Buchanan does. He points out that Rubin worked for a firm, Goldman Sachs, that the Secretary of the Treasury, that benefited from the NAFTA bailout.
Sir, I rise to the defense of Pat Buchanan.
So do
I say that.
Well, I do too.
Rubin works for Goldman Sachs, and Rubin is not only a class-conscious capitalist, which he would be the first to say, but it's been known to happen in the United States of America that a politician or a cabinet member feathers his nest, shall we say. It's been known to happen. It's not, Americans are not,
occasionally
my God, all right?
Teapot Dome and all.
Yeah, it's been known to happen. In fact, I would say that when a astronaut comes back from Earth, the first thing that he sees is the Great Wall of China, and the first thing that he smells is the corruption of American politics.
Did
I say something wrong? Sorry about that.
The Jewish people have become part of the establishment.
Absolutely,
without a doubt.
absolutely.
And in fact, they're the best. They are at the top of the line in terms of the social economic system in the United States.
They're the richest ethnic and religious group in the United States.
Yeah, now,
let me cut through here for a minute.
Yeah, he wants to cut through. Let's hear
one objection I have to the whole focus here, I can't disagree with 99% of what Lenni said.
Well, there's some
or your
agreement
question.
points, yeah.
But my disagreement is the follows. I thought we were speaking with a focus on the Middle. If we go to the Middle East, these American ideas don't apply. And again, I'm trying to show it's a kind of, I would never accuse my friend of being imperialistic. He's not. That there's a cultural mindset, which could be called imperialism, to Americans, Jew or Gentile, that we continually focus on these places, Israel, Syria, Saudi Arabia, with an American viewpoint. These ideas of equality, of this and that, have nothing to do with the Middle East, or very, very little. And if they're held even in Israel, it's by a small circle of educated Ashkenazim, only a part of them on the left.
And there's only
right now there, Monroe.
These ideas do not govern the Islamic world.
As we are talking, this is Friday. This is Friday. We are talking on a Friday.
Be realistic and not,
all right. We are talking on a Friday. Now, you know that ever since Netanyahu came to power, there have been battles on the streets of Jerusalem, all right? And this is not a small handful of Ashkenazi, because, as I said before, that as you agreed, the #1 song on the hit parade for a period of time was "The Messiah Isn't Coming, He Isn't Even Phoning." In other words, I would say that half the Israelis hate the other half.
In
other words, if you want to say it's 60-40, that's fine. But I know, listen, I have worked for Israelis in the United States who, when they see a Hasid on the street, they spit.
Oh, come on, man.
I hope not. I tell you, for sure.
Maybe you could, in terms of this thing, in terms that we had Herzl, right, and we had the beginning of the Zionist movement to reestablish a homeland for the Jews in what was Palestine and that sort of thing. And then, so now we got a division. So then we have a division, if you could share clear for me. We have those who are of a religious tradition, whether Orthodox or so forth, give credence and faith to the faith of the fathers, as it were, as opposed to secular. Then we have another division, if I may, where you have socialist-minded Ben-Gurion or so forth, and then you have Jabotinsky and revisionists in terms of that. Now that comes down to where you have Labor and you have Likud. And could we talk about those forces in a way, and where do they represent, and what proportion of
like any
people?
It's
is
like
that more or less the
if you take the Republican Party in the United
Yeah.
States, right? It has two. They talk about two factions: the so-called country club Republicans, who are economic conservatives, and the Christian right. Now, the Likud is like the L in Likud stands for liberal. Part of the Likud were a group of people who were called the liberals. They were like liberal Republicans here. They were observant, semi a little bit, but their basic thing was democracy, capitalism. They were businessmen and professionals, slightly conservative and nationalistic. They merged with the Herut, which was extreme nationalistic. In the coalition now, we have Zionist Orthodox parties. So it's a mishmash. It's a federation of people, some of whom will eat pork on Yom Kippur in Gaza, and some of whom are extremely observant. And the labor is the same. Many a man with a yarmulke votes for labor for working class reasons. There's no exact one-on-one.
But with the exception, if I may, with the exception of some of these people who are just totally beyond the pale, as far as you can see, these few Ashkenazi, Natura Carta, religious, Orthodox people,
All right.
all of the rest of them are of a mind that the State of Israel in its foundation in 1947 and that Zionist
let me define
enterprise
something for
in
you.
the State of Israel
Some of them
is a legitimate,
some of them are
is a
political,
legitimate thing to support.
Some of them are political, let's call them religious nationalists, and some are old-time. It's like in the Muslim world, the same thing. Every fundamentalist is not an Islamic crazy or terrorist. You have like the Saudi Arabian religious clergy that's very conservative. I compare them to the non-political rabbinate here or there. Then you have the guys like the Iranian mullahs or the Sudanese mullah who are out to use the sword. And it's the same with Jewish or Hindu Orthodox. Well, half the Hindus who are religious don't really care that much for politics. No, I was just and then there are those who want to fight the Muslims.
I was just trying to say, the Zionist enterprise, the establishment of a new state in this modern era, where you've been in diaspora, is agreed to by virtually all of the Jewish people. They have various forms about how that can be agreed.
No, in Israel.
With the exception of these few
like
Natura Carta people.
Let's put it this way.
Who is against, in the Jewish community, the idea that the state of Israel should exist?
Let's try to quantify it. That's a good way of doing it. Okay. Look, as far as the Jews of the world, Monroe is quite correct. You have to distinguish now between the Jews of the world and the Jews of Israel. As far as the Jews of the world are concerned, not counting Israel, okay, I would say a majority, definitely a majority, are non-Zionists. That's not the same as saying anti-Zionist, but non-Zionist.
What does that mean, non-Zionist?
Non-Zionist means they are, here, for example, in the United States, they are the richest group in the United States, but a majority of American Jews do not give a single penny to Israel in their entire lives. That's for sure. For sure.
I guess what I'm asking, what
wait a minute. I'm trying to quantify it. That's non-Zionism. They don't give a penny. They're, as the richest group in the country, the most traveled, yet no more than about 25% of the Jews have ever been to Israel. Now, I've been to Israel. There's nothing wrong with going to Israel, okay? But they don't even go to Israel, okay? They don't give a penny. They don't go to Israel. They don't speak Hebrew, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly they are non-Zionists. And bear in mind, when I say that, I think the majority of Zionist scholars would agree with me on that because in practical terms, the Zionist movement gets nothing from them, gets nothing from them whatsoever, okay? In terms of anti-Zionists, very few. Maybe 5% of the American Jews have some kind of leftist ideology and some kind of objection to Zionism. Most of the young kids don't give a damn and don't know enough about the issue because they're not Jews. They were born into a Jewish family. They're now out there living happily with their shiksa and smoking dope or whatever they do, you know what I'm saying? And they couldn't care less about the Middle East, and it's as foreign to them as the moon.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, inside Israel, some friends of mine estimated that about 10% of the Jews do not consider themselves Zionists, either from a religious point of view or from a left-wing point of view.
That's what I was asking for a definition. Right? What is a Zionist?
No, wait.
What is a secular Zionist?
I mean,
what is a Zionist?
But what we're now seeing, okay, is, and I think Monroe would agree with me, is that it's not only a question of should there be a Jewish state, but what are the dimensions of that Jewish state geographically, and what is the quality of life? In other words, is it going to be a secular state or a religious state? Yeah, so that I, as an anti-Zionist, okay, I reject Zionism root and branch. But wait a minute, what I'm saying is that I see, what I tell these Zionist kids who are demonstrating for freedom of the streets in Jerusalem is, listen, you know, all you got to do is call for a democratic, secular Israel-Palestine, and you get that.
What does it mean when you say you're anti-Zionist? What do you mean specifically when you say that?
All right, number one, I would say this. Certainly, I am not Zionism believes in the ingathering of the Jews.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at.
I categorically reject that. I'm at home right here in America.
Okay,
period. All right? I have no, you know, America's a terrible place in some regards and a beautiful place in other regards, but I certainly have no intention of going to another country which is a terrible place in some regards and a beautiful place in other regards. So I don't gain anything by it.
And do you see it the same way, Monroe, that Zionism he used the term ingathering, which comes out of the Torah.
Right.
And he says it's the ingathering of the Jews at the end of the period, and that what Zionism is.
Oh, yeah.
Are you a Zionist?
Yes,
then
I am. I believe Jewish
and it comes out of the spiritual tradition.
Comes out of, look, Zionism is just another name for nationalism, Jewish nationalism.
You see Zionism just another name for nationalism,
It's Jewish
right?
nationalism.
Okay.
I mean, it's not Polish nationalism or Bulgarian, it's Jewish nationalism.
Right. But I would
I tried to point out, in the world today, nationalism, which is, I feel, an increasing force in many parts, is either takes a racial aspect or it takes a religious aspect, you know, or it takes some kind of, usually both or some combination thereof. You understand? Now, what I was taught in the Zionist youth group, in the right-wing one, the Beitar as a boy, was Jewish people are mono-national, and the Jewish religion is the Jewish nation is mono-religious, and the Jewish religion is mono-national. And I think this is, again, to focus this away from the United States, back into the Middle East, where Israel really is. It's not somewhere between New York and Pittsburgh.
But there is a close connection between.
That in that part of the world, the Turks used to rule a lot of it. And they have a word in Turkish called millet, and the millet is a religious nation. Like they listed Samaritan Jews are a millet, Orthodox Jews are a millet, Armenians who belong to the Armenian Church are a millet, the Maronites of Lebanon were a millet, and so on. Sunni Arabs. The Middle East is a collection of tribes that are millets, that are where your nationality, to a certain extent, defines your religion.
So do you
Not so over here.
I see. Do you think in a way then, Monroe, that it is, we look at the geopolitical terms without any of these overlays, and there were a lot of people who were objecting to the whole idea of there being, you know, from these traditional views and everything, but now, in a certain sense, it would be fair to say in geopolitical terms, where the morality questions don't rise to the front as they do in national consideration so often and so on.
Why not morality?
It's a matter of power and so forth. And what has essentially happened is that while it was a struggle in 1947, what has essentially happened now is that the Jewish enterprise of Zionism, establishing of the state of Israel against these Arab peoples who were there, they've essentially won the war, as it were.
No,
you don't see
like
it that
Lenni
way.
are fighting back. There'll be another election in 3.5 years, and the left may win. But you raised the question: what is in Israel the left?
Well, I mean in terms of the Jewish enterprise against, let's say, the Palestinian or Arab peoples that were there.
No, it's an ongoing
Arabs
struggle.
certainly have
not thrown in the towel.
You know, I mean, they are out there duking it out.
You think they are effectively duking it out?
Well, let me put it this way: effectiveness.
The Israelis are overwhelmingly powerful.
Harold,
in geopolitical terms.
Harold, effectiveness is one thing,
There's
but
no
certainly the majority. Look, even Arafat. Even Arafat, who I consider has compromised far in excess of rationality, nevertheless, if you ask Arafat, what is your end goal? He would tell you, well, in the fullness of time, a secular democratic Palestine. And the reason for that, now, you know, I may never see it, but, you know, but he would tell you, but the reason he says that is because the overwhelming majority of Arabs believe that the country was stolen from them, and no amount of military victories on the part of the Israelis is going to convince them otherwise. Now, bear in mind.
Arabs think that.
Bear in mind.
The larger
I'd like to toss out something. See, you know, Monroe talked about the millet. Hey, let's get realistic. The national community is a religious community.
And
religious
power.
community is a national community. Monroe, realistically speaking, what percentage of the Israelis are atheists, in your mind?
I have no idea.
No idea?
Because I'll tell you why. Because of two things. When I was in the war, they used to say, which may be phony, but I found it to be true, there are no atheists in foxholes.
We atheists are very intelligent.
No.
The minute we hear, listen, there's a war on, come on down my foxhole. We say, thank you, no.
I've been in
Which
homes
war
of this-
were you referred to?
When I was in the World War II.
Or you were in
The last
World War
good
II.
war.
But I don't know about that. But I found many Israelis. This is why I can't give an answer to his question. Like a cousin of mine in Tel Aviv, and he comes on like as at least an agnostic. And I've been in his home. He sometimes keeps in the refrigerator a little tin this size of imported crab meat.
Yeah.
And when I was there 5 years later, the same tin of crab meat. And he was the one. He gave me the expression. He said, "I'm so irreligious that I would eat Hazer in Gaza on Yom Kippur. That I would eat pork in a town like Gaza on the holiest day when a Jew is supposed to fast." Now, he comes on very sophisticated and so on, but the same man is in the synagogue praying, on the high holy days.
So there
and
might
so
be
on.
this surface
There's a lot of
error.
people.
Well,
It's like, to me, I'll
yeah.
answer a few years ago, a movie came out called The Exorcist here.
Yes.
About a girl who's possessed by a demon.
Yeah.
And I went to see the movie over at a movie house where a bunch of motorcycle kids from parochial school in New Jersey came in. And they were all like Catholic youth in black leather jackets, little boys and girls sitting there. And when the girl who's demonized is spitting on the priest who's trying to exorcise her, and she's saying, "To hell with you," and worse, to the priest, one of these boys said, "That's what I'm going to tell Father Flanagan next week in school." And there was this, But I'm sure will be born and die a religious Catholic, that boy. And I think a lot of Jews are like, a lot of people are like,
Monroe,
it's a modern world.
look,
Nobody
you
wants
know
to,
as well as
come on
I
like
do,
religious
Monroe,
anymore, except in the
I would
Muslim
say,
But there's something
I would
there.
say,
Yeah,
But there is a
something, that spark
spirituality
is
there.
always there.
Yeah, Monroe, I would
I hear
say that the percentage of Jews with an education in Israel and the percentage of Jews with an education in Israel is very high, that the percentage of educated Jewish atheists must be in the magnitude of 40–50% of the educated Jews. That's say Jews with
The
a
reason
PhD.
I don't buy Lenni's thing
Okay?
so much, I don't want to interrupt you, but so that's when I lived in South Africa as a kid, and when we used to go to Israel, I saw Jews very aware because they were aware of Hitler coming, aware of the war coming.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of talk of the coming war with the British in Palestine and the South African Jewish community, and in Israel.
Yeah.
When I got back to New York when I was about 16, and the war was just starting over there, or had been the Jewish kids I met at my grandparents' home in Brooklyn, they didn't know from this stuff. I used to look at what's wrong with these morons here in Brooklyn. They don't know about Jabotinsky. They don't know about the labor. They don't know about the Haganah, the Irgun, the coming war, the annihilation of the Jews.
Stern.
I used to tell them, hey, our people are going to get killed over there in Europe. What do you mean? And their main interest in Jewish things was maybe Jewish boxers, Jewish basketball players and those eating the Jewish food, going to a good deli.
Yeah.
They were like ignorant apes. But now, by the time these same guys got to World War II and the propaganda and Hitler and the Holocaust, they got very angry. The Jews I met in the army in World War II. So yes, Lenni's right. Most Jews don't give a good darn about Israel and so on. But when things get bad again, if they get bad again, over there or over here, you'll see a reawakening.
Well, I mean, that's...
just like when you read about Yugoslavia.
No doubt, if things got bad,
But I don't think
if there were
really right. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and probably you're right in everything, but I don't think if you were, I mean, most of the people, Jewish people around the world, probably have a very strong, affirmative affection for the state of Israel.
Oh,
Wouldn't
God,
they
I hope
naturally
so.
have?
I disagree. I am telling you that it is largely the empty barrels making the most noise, because if you go to the Salute to Israel Day parade, which takes place once a year in New York City, okay, most of the men present watching the parade
older guys?
No, young or old, are wearing yarmulkes.
Yeah.
Okay, but the overwhelming majority of American Jews and New York Jews don't wear yarmulkes. They ain't there. They just ain't there. What has happened
But their
in the
birth
United
rate is rising.
Wait a minute. Their birth rate can rise. The fact of the matter is the number of Orthodox Jews, the percentage of Orthodox Jews in the United States has declined from 9% to 6.6%. It's going down, not up, even with the birth rate.
Right.
Because while their birth rate is not rising, it's just always been high. Okay, while their birth rate is high, the fact of the matter is any number of Orthodox Jews stopped being Orthodox. In fact, I read an article in Moment magazine where they said, look, the conservative synagogues recruit. Their primary recruiting is from the Orthodox. Kids grow up and they just simply decide, listen, I can't make this anymore. I got to have a more modern religion. So they shift from Orthodox to conservative. Meanwhile, the conservatives shift to Reform.
I got around. I mean, in the 60s, I was briefly in Belgrade, coming up, going to go to Italy and back into Spain. And when I was there in the coffee houses and the writers, they all say, when's the war beginning? Because I studied the history of Yugoslavia.
Yes.
And they said, oh, one thing Tito solved was this ethnic, Croats and Slovenes and Bosniaks and Serbs. They don't hate each other anymore. At least that's over with. We may have and I said, I don't believe it. I think someday you guys will kill each other like your fathers did.
Yeah.
And I don't believe all this stuff.
Are you saying in the United States?
No, again, you're focused. I don't know if what will happen in the United States.
Well,
and he wants to bring it to the Middle East.
Well, let's take South
saying
Africa.
Israel.
Let's take South Africa. In other words, let me put it this way. Israel has its problems.
Yeah.
Okay, in the Middle East. Okay.
Yeah.
But one thing it is not. It is not the solution to the Jewish question in the rest of the world, because there is no longer a Jewish question in most of the world. In most of the world, the Jews
How many Jews are there in the Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia?
Yeah.
If Levitt gets in, Levitt has made several remarks now.
No, Levitt hasn't made any anti-Semitic remarks.
Well,
but let me tell you this: if the United States would let them come to if the gates of Israel and the gates of the United States were equally open, the Jews of the Ukraine would be in Brighton Beach, not on Tel Aviv
First
Beach.
of all,
and everybody knows that. Monroe knows
you're
it.
an economic
and everybody
determinist.
not an economic determinist.
Secondly, it may
because
be
when
true.
when the gates were open in the 70s and 80s, they went to Brighton Beach, not to Tel Aviv.
Let me ask you this: we talk about being American Jews. As an American, forget the Jewish thing. You favor unrestricted immigration of either Russian Jews or Chinese?
Absolutely. In fact, I tell you something.
I don't.
Well, Monroe, let me tell you something. I just did a tour. My job required me to ride about 200 bus lines in New York City in the last few months, and I can tell you that there is no in New York City you are no more than 2 blocks from a Chinese takeout in any direction.
That's
all right.
Absolutely.
And the question as to whether or not we will exclude people from the United States, no. The question is whether the Chinese will exclude us from the United States. It's done, my friend. It's done. Okay. There are. In my industry, which I won't mention for security reasons, but in my industry, I run into platoons of Pakistanis, platoons of Israelis, platoons of Arabs, of Russians, of Koreans, of Japanese.
New York. God bless. On the eve of the Civil War, sir, New York City was 50% foreign-born. I would guess New York City today is roughly 55% foreign-born.
Yeah, right.
But if you go between the Atlantic and Pacific, I've met a lot of Americans that don't like unrestricted immigration.
They are happy to see a Japanese factory open up and provide some jobs in Tennessee. They are happy as hogs in manure.
Okay,
right?
Lenni, you said before, you're coming up to the end of the hour in a sense, and that you said before that the opposition on the part of the Arabs of that Middle East or beyond is an effective opposition to Israel. It seems to me, in a certain sense, Israel is an overwhelming superpower and can set the terms of whatever they want. They've won, in a certain sense.
No, they haven't.
Well, it seems. Now,
because they lack, a lot of people like Lenni in Israel that lack assurance that they're right. Most Palestinians believe their cause is just. Like the German army fought with a sign, Gott mit uns. God is with us on their belt.
Nationalism.
Most Arabs believe God is with them. I don't know how many Israelis really believe God is with them.
But certainly they did. Coming in the foundation years.
Well, that was a long time ago.
Hitler, the Holocaust, the Arabs pushing them into the sea. Every Jew, even anti-Zionist, was probably for defending the Jewish Yeshua at that
and trying
time.
to get a historical perspective on this.
The Communist Party of Israel supported the War of Independence.
I would sense perhaps in your view that it would be important for the people who are concerned with the the fate and the history of the development of the survival of Israel as an entity and so forth, and particularly someplace where maybe bad times come, let's hope God's not, there's a place for them to go when there wasn't and so forth. And but you think that there ought to be, right makes, peace through strength. They ought to be strong, they have to be very, very strong to be able to assert their rights to what they're doing and the legitimacy and the appropriate use of power in the sense of a geopolitical understanding of things to assert their rights in the security of
I mean,
that's your position as opposed to
like the revolutionary, I mean, praise the Lord and keep your powder dry, like they said here during the revolution.
Look, I agree with you on Harold, on one thing. I think any rational person would have to agree that the Israelis are militarily overwhelmingly superior. They have 200 atom bombs, et cetera,
yeah,
and a super army, et cetera.
And he is
but
a geopolitician.
they will win. In fact, I would say this: they will win all the wars and all the battles except one, and that's the last one, because in the modern 20th century, it is not possible to convince the Arabs or the Palestinians to accept second-class citizenship anywhere.
We did with the Cherokee, and we just defeated them.
Yes,
The history of the world
that was 150 years ago.
Yeah, but the history of the world.
No, that was Monroe. Harold, that's the whole point. 150 years. Look, in 800 A.D., the Hungarians conquered the Slovaks. They took their king, they killed him. Svyatopluk the Proud, they got rid of him. And for the next... Svyatopluk the Proud. No. Okay? All right, they got rid of him.
Yeah.
And the peasants went back to the plow for the next 1,000 years. Okay?
Taking the long view.
Today, the average... There are more Palestinian women engineers than there are American women engineers. And those gals ain't going to tolerate no second-class citizenship. They don't want to hear it from Izzy. They don't want to hear it from Mohammed. They don't care.
Well, the Slovaks.
We've only got about 3 minutes left. So how do you deal with what Lenni
If you go to
said?
Slovakia, I should just answer, if you go to Slovakia today, you'll find there are 600,000 Hungarians, a minority. They're being oppressed, and the Hungarian nationalists want that territory, which was given them back by Hitler, to be given them back from Slovakia.
But
because whether it's Hungarians and Slovaks or Jews and Palestinians, I don't think these problems are solved. I just summarized it. In 1187, approximately, William Strongbow, an English knight, a Norman Welsh knight, invaded Ireland with 500 men and a couple of knights.
Yeah.
Well, that battle is still going on in Belfast and in Ulster today. You know, I don't see these quarrels, whether it's in Slovakia, Ulster, or Eritrea.
Well, you lived in South Africa. You lived in South Africa.
Will there ever be...
I think everybody would have been surprised to see as much peace as there is today between blacks and whites in South Africa. And things ain't perfect there. Okay? In the United States, when I was a kid, they were lynching blacks in the South.
Yeah, I remember, and we made progress there. But Monroe is a realpolitik
Well,
fellow,
I am too.
right?
I'm arguing that his realpolitik is crackpot realism.
You think crackpot realism? But is there possibility, we only got a minute or so left, that at the end of time, or at the end of the time, at the time of the, that there could be emerging, as it said in the Torah, that the time will come in a time of a world of elemental justice
most
that
men,
exists.
Muslim, Christian, and Jew, all believe in a Messiah to come. So let's hope when he comes therell be peace.
And it will be in an era of
justice.
If there is no equality,
do you think we're near the time of universal justice?
I don't know. I hope so.
Harold, if there is no equality between Arab and Jew, there will be war between Arab and Jew. Not maybe, not for sure, not 100% for sure, 1,000% for sure. Equality is the name of the game as far as peace is concerned.
And if some of the ancient scriptures are right, it would be equality in all of the world, and it would be a new era that would be entered.
Well, I'll tell you, I not only wish for that, but my main priority right now is to keep the American whores and knaves, our politicians, from corrupting the Middle East further, than, as everybody said,
not a bad
by
idea.
backing Israel in its discrimination against the Arabs.
Okay, we only got started on a subject that could go on for hours and hours and hours, and maybe we will after the program is over. But let me just remind you in the audience, it's been your pleasure to have to my left, Lenni Brenner, right? In this corner, the iron wall, Zionist revisionism from Jabotinsky to Shamir. Both these books highly recommended. Obviously, the second war is Wars of the Jews, and it's subtitled From Biblical
A History of Warfare from Biblical through Modern Times of the Jewish People.
All right, there you are. Two books, and it's with Monroe Rosenthal.